Hello, and welcome back to lesson number 7. Now, lesson 7 is going to be a review of the contents of the course. The reason why I want to do this today is because I want to give you as much chance to reinforce the things that we've gone through on this course. Now, not everyone on this course joined from the very beginning. So it may be that you haven't seen the materials, or you didn't have enough time to go through them. So before we do our final practicum, I would like to give you the chance to really focus in on the types of materials that I think TESOL is all about. And the intent is, if you know and understand this material already, then it's an opportunity to refresh your memory on it. If you didn't have the chance to really go through it in detail at the beginning of the course, then it's another chance for you to review. At the moment, what I am doing is watching your, just call this up, watching your lesson 6 materials, because this is provided for you and I to share the contents that you want to use in your final lesson. And the materials that you provide, I will then put onto our Moodle course for everyone to be able to see and read and watch before we do our final lesson. Okay, so the key point that I began with this course was the idea that language always happens in a context, whether it's a warm-up part of the lesson, whether it's topic related, or whether it's review oriented. What you want it to do is match the mood and necessity of the moment. So contexts can be as short as 3 minutes, or they could be as long as a full 16-week course. But what you want to do is make sure that every activity that you plan, every material that you provide, you think very carefully about the context of when and how it's going to be used. So context, as I point out, is the idea of being with text. So the concepts of semiotics, which are ways that we pass messages, and situational context are all part of the activity, not just in planning, but also in the way that you present it in the class and the way that you work with the students to make sure that the activity or the class or the course is successful. There's also the cultural context as well. So an activity that would work well in the UK might not work well in Korea. There's always a cultural context of what students expect and what you are expecting them to do. So you have to keep that in mind as well. The wider context, so the categories of social situation, then kind of, it reduces down towards just the sounds that you are making. So what we're doing in any activity or any situation in a classroom is knowing what the context is, then trying to make sure that everyone understands what is meant. Then we go to the words that we are using and then how we pass that message on. And this is happening all the time. So this is not, this is a language in context point. It's not necessarily a teaching context, but all of these things are happening all the time. So you need to keep that in mind in your role as a teaching assistant or teaching fellow. everything that you do in a class should be based on the idea that you want students to get better at something. You want them to, whether it's a discrete skill of listening or reading or speaking or writing, or whether it's something larger than that, but you want them to come away with an improvement in their knowledge. And epistemology, the science of knowledge, tells us that it's the mixture of facts and belief. So even if what you are telling the students is true, and the activity or the course that you have planned for them will improve their skills, if they don't believe in it, if they don't connect to it, then they won't actually learn it. They'll be able to do it at that moment, but when you want them, and this is particularly true with language learning, you want them to be able to remember how to do something and recall it and do it at a time that's convenient for them. So if they don't actually know it, if they don't connect with it, or they don't believe you, it doesn't matter how good the activity is. You have to connect with the students so that they know it. And then one day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year later, when they need, when they need that information, they will have it. They'll be able to use it. Now, I also mentioned the ideas of heuristics. So methods of learning and solving problems, making decisions, allowing people to discover things for themselves and learn from their own experiences. A very good teacher will have the students believe that they learned that piece of information or that skill by themselves. So very rarely at the end of a course are you going to tell the students, and you learned everything because of me. That's not how learning works. The learning, solving problems, making decisions, and using your own experiences is part of the context of epistemology. So if the students believe and trust that they are learning it with their own skill and improving their own skill through their own activities, then they're more likely to be able to recall it and use it at a future time. I mean, these can be negative decisions that people make. So crimes involve learning and solving problems and making decisions, but it's because that's how the human brain works. So if you can make people make positive decisions for themselves, then they are more likely to be positive about the decisions they're making. And as I've mentioned before, these are two people who, if you get a chance to read their work, I would recommend Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. But they won a Nobel Prize in economics based on the way that they were able to understand how human beings make decisions. And part of being a teacher is trying to make your students make good decisions. So the heuristics that they use are things like availability. So humans tend to give more value to things that are recent or very easily remembered. So if you can make a memorable activity or give them something to think about, they're more likely to remember it, and they're more likely to give it more value. Affect heuristic, which is decisions more strongly controlled by your mood at the time, which is why your affect as a teacher in the classroom is so important, that you have to believe what you're doing. You have to believe in the activity that you're doing, which takes a lot of preparation. But if you have a positive affect, and if you are working positively towards the activity, then students are more likely to decide to go with you. And the idea of a representative heuristic, and this is what we mean by context. So students want to be made comfortable by having an experience in the past to match it to. So having patterns of activities in class is so important, because whether the content changes, if the type of activity remains the same, then students are more likely to connect with it and get more from it. So in our very first lesson, I used this quote from Halliday and Hassan. And this is the idea, this is a heuristic idea of the success with which people communicate. The idea that you know what the other person is going to say. We always have a good idea of what's coming next, so we are seldom surprised. The meaning of this is that human beings tend to communicate in a very similar way. So there is a concept called a non sequitur, which is something that doesn't fit with others. So if you ask, what would you like for lunch? And then the other person says sandwich or bento, or let's go to the cafeteria, then that is within the range of acceptable responses. But if you say, what would you like for lunch? And the person says, a large hat, please, that isn't what goes on. Now, this is, of course, a ridiculous example, but what we are trying to do at all times in a lesson is make sure that the expectation of what's coming next is being met. And so setting up systems and repeat activities is a way to make students feel comfortable, and it's always going to make the communication more successful. And I use the example of the scene from Last Samurai, where Katsumoto is trying to get a conversation from Nathan Algren. And he basically, at the end of it, says, I have given you my name, you have given me yours. This has been a good conversation. And what the scene plays on dramatically is that in order to have a better understanding of each other, they have to establish the commonalities of communication. So by the end of the movie, of course, they're working together and they're very close friends. But at this moment, only one of them is playing by the rules. Only one of them is doing something that plays with the idea of communicative success. And so once they both start playing by the rules, their communication improves markedly. And this is not just, this is true of any kind of communication, whether it's in business or in politics or in people's personal lives. When the communicative act matches the opposite side of the communicative act, where the answer matches the question, communication is much more successful. We could go into a lot more technical aspects of language teaching, but just to say that if you continue with not with language teaching, but with being a teacher, then all of these things will come into being. And it's the importance of knowing that teaching a language is fundamentally about communication. So once you can understand the field of communication, where and how it works most effectively, you can then design activities around that and be a more successful teacher. We went through the idea of using a more computational approach to language learning. And again, if you want to continue with English language teaching, this is certainly something that I would recommend that you take a look at. It's called systemic functional linguistics. It's not a way to improve teaching, but it is a way to understand how languages work. And again, it's not just for English. You can do this with, I think, almost any language, because almost any language can be mathematized. It can be made into an equation and broken down for it to be researched. So again, there are things that you can do after this course in relation to heuristics, economics, decision-making, systemic linguistics, that will allow you to understand better how communication occurs. I also introduced you to the idea of the initiate, respond, feedback activity that I think some of you, when we had our practicum down in the Easy Plat, did actually include this in your work, and the idea that within a spoken activity, you have to be able to create a loop that students can replicate when talking about the content. So in a flipped classroom, you expect they've done the reading and they've done the listening, and then you can initiate a question that students are ready to respond. And then because both of them have this shared capacity, they've both done the reading, they've both done the listening, then they're able to kind of expect what the answer might be. And then that gives them more confidence to give feedback or follow up and give a follow-up question. So this is what we looked at in the first lesson. And so, like we say, when we're talking about expected responses, did you enjoy the movie last night? I really did. How about you? Response, pass. You could, an acceptable response to that would be, yeah, kind of. How about you? Or not really. How about you? So all three of those are expected responses. The pass allows the other person to then say, well, I really liked it, or yeah, I wasn't so sure either. And once you have achieved that level of understanding of each other, it doesn't matter if you disagree, because you have the same frame to move forward with the interaction. So as I say, an old lawyer's piece of advice is never ask a question if you don't know the answer. But also, I think, yeah, I did put the translation, never plan activity if you can't predict the outcome. Now, not all activities go perfectly, but if you plan an activity and it goes 100% differently than what you expected, that's poor planning. If it goes 50%, then it could be the students were having a bad day, or one of the people that hadn't done the preparation or something like that. So always be ready to change if necessary, but students are rarely going to be confused if the in-class activities are correctly prepared, and if they come from a place where they understand that you're thinking about them. And the final thing that I want to talk about today is when you're doing a language class, particularly one like the course that we are looking at for global issues, the advice that I have is always be adding something. So always be trying to take the listening activity that you have, take the reading activity that you have, and add one level to it. So the textbook has a wide variety of topics about global issues, and they have long readings and listenings and lectures and things like that. What you want to do with the work in the class is just be adding an extra level to it. Take whatever the source material is and give it one extra level, one more example, one more application, one more thing that the students can do with it that will, first of all, improve their understanding of it, and second of all, give them more confidence when they come across the topic again in the future. Because what we try and do is select textbooks that include topics that students will come across again in their academic careers. So always in your activities, try to be adding something, or have the students feel confident that they can add something to it from their own experience. And the moment you do that, you contextualize it, you make it apparent and relevant to the students, then they will engage with the activity, then they will feel more confident, then they will be active students in the class, and you will have done your job well. So that's what we're trying to do. Always be adding. And of course, your job as a teaching assistant is there to add value for the students to the work that the teacher is already doing, whether it's becoming a partner for a student in an activity, whether it's giving examples to help build the student's confidence, even, you know, administering the activities in the class while the teacher is preparing the next thing. You are an additional and a necessary part of the courses that you are in. If you were not necessary, you wouldn't be there. And so the important thing is always to feel that your job is to be adding something to the class, because your presence in the class really does add to the value of the teacher who's already there. Now, if you're the only teacher in the class, it's 100% on you to be the person who's doing the adding. But it doesn't have to be plus 10, doesn't have to be plus 5. If it's only plus 1, then you are doing the thing that we talked about in terms of epistemology. You are making the students believe in the activity. You're making the students believe in the work. And the more they believe, the more they will remember. And the more they remember, the better it is for them in the future when they need that skill or they need that information. Okay, so that's as far in the content review that I want to do. I will come back to this paper here. What I'd like you to do is make sure that by the middle of next week, before we get to the middle of next week, you have your materials. Let me just get my schedule. That you have your materials ready and uploaded. So if so, where it says lesson material URL, the flipped aspect, if the lesson plan is not complete yet, don't worry about that. It's the material that I want, because it's the flipped aspect that we need to get down, because I want to take those URLs and add them to Moodle so that people have the chance to review it before we go to the final lesson practicum. And I would like to have that on June 13th, which is a Tuesday, and do it at 10 a.m. like we did before. I'll be sending out an email with the same information after I've uploaded this video to Moodle. And if you can have your materials to me before next Wednesday, so that's Wednesday the 7th, if you can have that material to me before Wednesday the 7th of June, then I can upload it to Moodle, and then everyone has a few days to take a look at it, read things, watch the videos, and be ready for the lesson just like a student would. And then you can come to the class with your 3 activities to do with these materials. And we will all have prepared. We will have done the flipped aspect, and you get to do the activity in the classroom time. So those are the 2 dates. Wednesday the 7th, please make sure you have, from the document that I've shared with you, the URL. Then I can put that into Moodle. The lesson plan, I would like you to complete before June 13th, which is a Tuesday, and we'll have the lesson at 10 a.m. in EasyPlat as we did before. So if you have any questions or anything that you would like to check, please send me an email. If not, I will be in touch with you by email to remind you of the locations and, of the locations and the schedule that we've agreed here. And if you can't make it, then we will make an alternative arrangement. So once again, thank you very much for your time. I'm very much looking forward to the materials and the lesson plans that you prepare. So lesson materials, please share with me before next Wednesday, and be ready for your example lesson next Tuesday on the 13th of June. So have a good week. As I look out of the window, it is raining quite heavily now, and I have forgotten my umbrella. So it's going to be quite wet, I think. So, but take care of yourself, and I will talk to you very soon.